email address are there in the upper corner. Going to talk to you today about application servers in PeopleSoft. So in an earlier video, I'll put the link down below, there was a discussion on the database or the relational database management system, so the RDBMS. And so we talked about that in an earlier video, and so in this video we're going to be talking about the app server and how the app server actually communicates with that database. And so I'm going to go ahead and do this box here, and this is going to represent our application server. And this app server that we're putting in here, it's going to have two, so we'll go ahead and just label this as our app server. And it's going to have two distinct sets of functionality on this app server. On the left-hand side, we're going to have what we call the Tuxedo side of the house, and then on the right-hand side, we're going to have what we call the PeopleSoft side of the house. So I'm just going to separate this app server into two sections, Tuxedo and PeopleSoft. And so in a later video, I'll go over some of the additional functionality of the Tuxedo functionality, but basically here I just want to kind of give you a general understanding of what the app server is doing. Now, before I get too far into this, what exactly is Tuxedo? Well, Tuxedo is actually a product that's been licensed by PeopleSoft, and it actually was then purchased by PeopleSoft when PeopleSoft bought BEA or WebLogic. Or BEA Software. So BEA Software created this product called Tuxedo, and it's used in order to do our transactional processing. So in other words, in order to take a transaction and move it from one place to another, and figure out what place it needs to move it to and from. So basically that's what Tuxedo is going to be doing for us. And then on the PeopleSoft side of the house, it's going to provide some functionality that's specific to PeopleSoft. For instance, we have servers like PS App Serve that's going to handle your login requests and handle your, and I'll put that on here, PS App Serve. It's going to handle your logon requests. It's going to handle your caching. You have things like PS Watch Serve, which looks out for runaway queries. You have PS Monitor Serve, which looks for hung processes. You have PS Query Serve, which is a special helper for select statements going to the database, going through query. And so there's a lot of different PeopleSoft servers that provide specific functionality to the PeopleSoft application. So in essence, what these are just basically executables that run on this server that provide that functionality. Okay, so that's what we have going on here. And then on the PeopleSoft side of the house, so it's providing the specific functionality to the application. Okay, so like for instance, caching or reading data from the database and stuff like that. So basically the component processor and all that kind of stuff, it all kind of runs here on this app server. And in order for this app server obviously to be able to get the data that's being requested of it, it needs to be able to pull that data from somewhere. So it has a good communication over here to the database, and of course that's going to go across the good old structured query language or the SQL protocol. And the way that we make that connection is going to be through usually what we call the TNS names entries. Or it could be an ODBC connection or whatever the methodology that you use to connect to your database. And so at that point, then the app server will be communicating with these various different services like PS App Serve or Watch Server, Monitor Server, whatever. These servers will be communicating over here to the database to retrieve whatever information has been requested of it. So that's the PeopleSoft side on the app server. Now on the Tuxedo side, the Tuxedo has a few things that are running here. It's got the Tuxedo BBL or the Bulletin Board Liaison. It also has what's called the list. It also has what's called workstation listeners, workstation handlers, and jolt station listeners and jolt station handlers. So we got workstation listeners and handlers, jolt listeners and handlers, the Bulletin Board Liaison, and the Bulletin Board List. What the heck is all of this stuff, and what is it doing for me on this app server? And what is Tuxedo providing this functionality for? Well, one thing that we have to understand is that the app server is going to be taking connections that are going to be coming into it. So where are these connections going to come from? They might come from a web client. They might come from a two-tier client, which is like an app server, an app designer session or a data mover session. or it could be, excuse me, that would be a 3-tier client, or it could be, again, the web client. So when the client comes in from one of the Windows executables, so let's say, for instance, this is a Windows client here, and on this Windows client, you're running Data Mover, or let's say you're running App Designer. Well, when you log into App Designer or Data Mover, one of the first things that it always asks you is for a username and password. So with that being said, that username and password then is going to coincide. It's then going to ask you for the type of server that you want to connect to. And so when you connect to the app server, you're making what's called a 2-tier connection. And that connection would come in just like this. It would come in right here to what's called the workstation listener. And other times you connect to your system, and you might be connecting, let's say, from a web server or web client, right? And so usually the web client's going to have a little bit different. So you got a web client, and so that means he's just running a browser, usually like Chrome or Firefox or something like that. And in that scenario, he's going to connect, before he connects to this server here, he's actually going to connect to what's called a web server, and then that web server is then going to forward him into what's called the Jolt listener. All right, so regardless whether they come in through the 3-tier client or through the web browser, they are going to be hitting a listener. Now, what exactly is a listener? Well, you can think of a listener is kind of like a maitre d' in a restaurant. When you walk into a restaurant, the maitre d' greets you and he says, "Hey, how many are in your party?" And then he seats you. So the maitre d' is responsible for managing the resources that are available in the restaurant. Think of the listeners as the managers of the resources that are available on this app server. So as an example, the resources are the handlers. So the handlers are kind of like the waiters, right? The waiters go out and get you your stuff. They do the things that you need to do. So the handlers are going to be responsible for assigning all of the various different tasks, or getting the tasks sent over to PS App Server, Watch Server, Query Server, whatever these PeopleSoft servers are that are communicating with our database. So as an example, I might have this query that runs and says, okay, give me a list of all the users that are in personal data, for instance. And so then if I'm coming in through the client, then that client's going to send that request over to the handler. The handler's going to send the request to the query server. Query server is going to then query the database. And that's pretty much how that works. And so the results then would be sent back, of course, to the client. And so what the listeners are is the listeners are simply just basically managers of the resources, and the resources are the handlers. And so you can think of the maitre d' waiter example, as the listeners are maitre d's and handlers are waiters. And so when we think about WSL, that means it's dealing with Windows type clients. And when we think about JSL, that means it's a Jolt client or a web-based client. And so that's basically how that concept works. So if I come back, and I'm just going to go ahead and get rid of all this stuff. And so if I think about these other two pieces here, so the BBL and the list, what exactly is the BBL and what is the list? Well, the BBL stands for Bulletin Board Liaison, and the list stands for just that, the Bulletin Board List. And so what exactly is the Bulletin Board Liaison and what is the list? Well, as I said, when these servers come online, they have different functionality. For instance, PS App Serve has the ability to log in users and validate their user ID against PS OperaDefn. It has the ability to do caching. It has the ability to do a lot of various different things, and general select statements and a lot of different things that PS App Serve can do. So for instance, if the request comes in and it says, hey, I need to do a simple select statement, then I might go to Query Serve if I'm going through PeopleSoft Query. But if I'm going to a search page, for instance, then it might go through PS App Serve. So in that scenario, in essence, what the list is doing is the list is keeping track of the capabilities of these servers as they come online. So when these servers come online, they announce themselves to the list, and the list is updated. Now, how is that list updated and how is that list managed? Well, that's the responsibility of this guy right here, the BBL. And that stands for the Bulletin Board Liaison. And I like to think of the Bulletin Board Liaison as kind of like the traffic cop, because he's responsible for basically keeping track of all these servers as they come online and then figuring out what their capabilities are. So in a nutshell, basically that's what a app server does for you, and that's how an app server works. Hopefully that makes sense. If you like the video, please smash the like button below and subscribe. We will have more videos coming up on the database, or excuse me, we also have a video on the database server that's already been created. We got one coming up on the web server and the process schedulers and the clients. So hopefully you'll enjoy this video series, and then we'll do a quick demo on everything at the end. Thanks a lot, and hope you enjoyed watching.